Hi everyone, from me, Brent Graham of goodforthegame.co.za. Welcome to this Thursday night edition of the Handicap Rugby Chat That Matters. I had my glasses on a few seconds ago, but things are steaming up a little bit, so I had to take them off, but I think I'll still be able to see the screen. I'm not that old, let's put it that way. And it's going to be a show with just two of us tonight, and let's welcome Nathan back, the Moss Man. Nathan, great to have you back on the show, and well done. I know you were spot on with a lot of last week's picks, particularly some of your early plays.
Last week was good, yeah. So URC went 6-1, and then Super Rugby was 4-2, so it was pretty strong. And do you want to guess what the only loser I had in URC was?
The only loser in URC, I'd have to guess. I'd guess the Sharks, Dad. The Sharks game.
There you go. You got it in one.
Is it?
Well done.
Now, funny enough, I managed to. And it's a pity we couldn't have put our heads together as long as we listened to you on all the other games, because I backed Benetton at 9-2 early in the week to actually win the game. And I tell you what I based it on, Nathan, is purely motivation. I just purely thought Benetton are going to be hungry. They're going to keep coming. And the Sharks team, well, as you say, they're so unreliable. Yeah. But yeah, it was one of the few highlights for me in the URC. I did well in Super Rugby, but the Lions, I think when Lions over 35.5 points, the line moved to 37.5. So, you start thinking to yourself, well, that's a good sign. But unfortunately, they absolutely fluffed their lines. And they still annoyingly got the bonus points in the last minute. So, like everyone will say, job well done, bonus point achieved. But no, man. That wasn't good enough against the Cardiff side. Before we get into the action, just having a look in the live chat, we've got Gogo Dad. I'm not sure we've had you on the show before, so good to have you on. Harry is in there. Mark is in there. Hi, guys. My wife, I might be playing me a few little tricks here. Werner coming in as well, and Tika Wenger as well coming in. Welcome to the show, guys. Going to be a great chat. Always good to get Nathan's thoughts on the weekend's rugby. You'd think I've been drinking Oracle style, but I haven't. I promise you I've got a cup of tea next to me. Right, yeah. Right, Nathan, let's get stuck into Super Rugby. I mean, we really are now at the business end of proceedings. And we've got a first game, and it's one of these high handicappers. I did see, in fact, I capped this game, I think 33.5, and that's very much where the line came out. I think it's shifted in. I just had a look before the show. There was some 28.5. I'm not sure if that's just a feeling that the line was just that bit too high, or is there anything in the team news side we should be aware of here?
Very much down to team news. So the Hurricanes have rotated heavily, playing a mostly second-string team. Moana, by comparison, they've gone back to their first team, having rotated heavily last week. So it's they're two kind of interesting looking team lineups. It sort of looks like a couple of NPC teams, to be honest. And I think, given that, I think the 33.5 was way too high, for these particular teams. And so, as you say, it's come in a long way since then. So what I've noticed, and this is just an observation sort of over the years, is that when a team does rotate really heavily, like in terms of bringing out the B team, there's generally sort of a 10 to 20 point drop, like in the line. And we haven't seen quite that much here. And it might be that there's still enough first team players in the Hurricanes team. But I think a sort of a 25 point line would be around about right. So there's still room to run on this one, but it was definitely one where I think the 33.5 on Moana was a great bet.
And just to talk points here for a second, we've got a points line of 64.5, which is getting up there as high as it gets in Super Rugby, and certainly understandable the way the Hurricanes normally play, and the Moana has certainly been leaking tries. But I mean, that's a high line if you're going to go overs, and particularly for me, if there's disruption amongst the teams. You often find let's call it the B team or the A.5 team, if you want to call it that, doesn't always click straight away. What are your thoughts? That seems like a high line to me.
Yeah, I've often thought the same thing in terms of the combinations and how they sort of gel together. The interesting thing is that there was a game sort of similar to this earlier in the season where I think the Hurricanes did the same thing against the Rebels, which went over, and that is one of the things that is actually keeping me off the under here. So, that said, if you wait, and most points lines tend to trend upwards over time, so you might see that before kickoff, you might get something higher than this, and then I might sort of fancy the under at that point.
Right, Johan Estes and saying he is going to go the unders, and then just welcome to the Crow Tips. And the Crow Tips, thanks very much for hosting the show last week. I did manage to catch the last couple of minutes of it, and then while I was writing my previews on the Friday morning, I was like listening to each game. and then sort of writing my preview like that. So it was good to catch up. And good to see Alex in watching the show as well. Alex, hope you're going well with your punting, mate. He says, don't underestimate the depth of the Hurricanes. I must say, I'm not firm on anything on this game. Certainly, if anything, I might be looking at unders points there at 64.5. I've got to do my preview still, so we'll come up with a bet on that one. Right, Nathan, let's go to the next one. Rebels plus 18.5 against the Chiefs. This handicap, if I'm not mistaken, has been fairly stable all week. I think it's also quite close to where I set it. And we've got another high points line here of 63.5.
It has gone up a couple. So I think from memory, it sort of opened 15.5 or 16.5. So did have had some involvement at that early number. It's an interesting one because my model projection is the Chiefs to win this fairly easily by something in the 20s. But I'm just sort of struggling mentally to get there. I had in my sort of mental handicap, which was a bit lower than that, and it's as I said, I'm just kind of struggling to really. I mean, it's not difficult to see the Chiefs, blowing out the Rebels, but at the same time, I thought they were pretty decent last week. Fairly resilient, and I don't think I'm just not willing to dismiss them completely. So. As I said, I did have some involvement at the early number. At this current number, would I still get involved? I'm not so sure.
Yeah, I just quickly looked on the forum and I see you spot on. I actually went 14.5 on this one, and I think it opened in South Africa at 14.5, 15.5 as well. So the number has moved there. But also I'm battling a little bit. Once again, even 63.5 for me. I always say in rugby, sometimes I use the phrase, especially when I'm on the unders, all I need is 10 quiet minutes. Give me 10 minutes without any points on the board, and I scrappy 10 minutes. And, if you get to 15 minutes into the game and it's 3-0 to the Chiefs or something like that, this points line is under big threat. One thing I can say about Super Rugby is things can turn very quickly. You could suddenly have a burst of 3 or 4 tries. So, I don't know, guys. I'm going to think up on that one as well. Also not too sure. Blake says fully... Oh, sorry, I think I brought up the wrong comment there. Blake says fully loaded Chiefs backline. Chris is also saying big guns back for the Chiefs. So, yes, maybe your model at the end of the day might be the way to go. The Crow Tips reckons long day for the Rebels. And for Reeds over the Chiefs. So, if we're going to let the boys in the live chat sort of rubber stamp your model there, Nathan, maybe, as you say, you don't have to do anything. You've got that early line. But I would think that perhaps 18.5 still might be worth a go there. Let's move on then to Saturday's games. It's an early start for South African teams. We're talking something like 4 o'clock in the morning. I can tell you I only get home at that time normally, so I won't be getting up for that one. It's the Drua minus 0.5. In other words, this is a choice game, and we've got a points line here of 50.5.
Yeah, so I've got, as I said, my mental handicapping exercise that I do, similar to you. I do have some sort of manual, handcrafted power ratings, and obviously I've got this model number, and they are all suggesting that the Reds should be favourites here. It's not something I've got involved in yet, and that minus a half, there's better numbers out there. So I think there's 2.5 at the moment, minus 2.5 on Bet365. So yeah, it's an interesting one because I always ask myself the question that if I haven't put a bet down on something by now, given that all the information's out there, all the teams are out there, I kind of ask myself why I haven't. And in general, if I haven't gone into something early, as soon as I had all the available information, I sort of question why I haven't done it. What is it that's holding me back? And I haven't.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So try not to be too impulsive about it. So I'm thinking, what is it in the back of my head that is keeping me off the Reds? And I think this one is relatively obvious that it's the draw at home, and it's a bit of a wild card factor. So that's kept me off it for now. As I said, though, the numbers I'm looking at still favour the Reds. The other thing I think is that there are a few sneaky team changes at the Drua as well that aren't always as obvious to people because the names aren't as well known. So, Harry Wilson out at the Reds, I think he's a well-known name. Everybody sort of recognises him, but there are a couple that I think maybe 3 sort of standard first-team players that are out for the Drua, but it's partly name recognition and probably name pronunciation. I'm not even going to attempt to do some of them. I think Momo is playing on the wing, so I'm going to say that name because that's an easy one.
Yeah, I must have some of those names. I remember the days when the old conductor used to come on the show. I was always amazed that guy could rattle off like the entire NPC team's names without blinking, and after about 15 brandy. So yeah, I don't even attempt most of them as well. Lots of comments on this one in the live chat. quite a split as well, I think, in opinion on this one. Just WJ is saying that this points line looks a bit low here, not seeing big showers. I think one thing you must check for in Fiji is the humidity levels. They can be very high. It can be very, very muggy, which does tend to make the games a little bit lower scoring. But also I just want to go back to his comment here. The Admiral, here he is. So the Admiral posts also on the Good for the Game forum. And it was quite interesting here, Nathan. I've never seen such a difference of opinion. I handicapped this game. I was well out. I had Reds, I think, -8.5 or 10.5 even it could have been. I can't remember what it was. And he was totally the other way. He had Drua firm favourite. So for two punters who both do quite a lot of punting, it was amazing that we were like 20 points apart. And the bookies, of course, have come smack in the middle of us here. So, yeah, just a very interesting difference in line. And, yeah, it's looking like a bit of a tricky weekend. Johan reckons actually overs on points. You got any views on the points here?
The understaker will be happy about this because I do have projections on all of the points lines. And from memory, I think I've got unders on nearly every game. I think there might be one where I fancy an over. So, yeah, this one I think is actually this one would be a pass for me just because I think it's just right around the number. Actually, that 50.5 is quite low. I think that has moved a little bit as well. So that looks low and is possibly weather related because like every weekend, like at this time of year in those tropical locations, they're always going to be projecting thunderstorms. I think it's basically a rainy season thing. So yeah, you wouldn't probably touch the points line until you are able to turn the TV on and actually see if it's either sunny or raining.
The Admiral coming in says his original handicap was definitely wrong. Admiral, 100%. Put my hand up as well. I think we both were wrong on that one. And the line probably where it is about right. Fareed reckons the Drua is too erratic to model. And that leads me nicely into Shane's question here. And we certainly, you don't have to go into too much detail, but Shane's interested when you talk about your total points lines and that. Yeah, any sort of snippets out there as to what sort of things you look for when you build your model, and how difficult I suppose it is to keep up to date. Don't give away anything actually, that can be sold online.
No, it's obviously based on historical data. So keeping up to date is just a matter of really just either manually updating or in general just scraping the data from various locations. And what I can tell you about points in general is, so when you're building a linear regression model, you're able to see the importance of different features. And I can tell you that the most important feature is the weather, or in this case, the rain. So if you've got good historical weather information and you're actually able to capture that, that's absolutely key, because without it, you're going to see crazy low scoring, and you'll have no idea why. And if you aren't factoring in weather, then it will just look like, okay, these two teams are low scoring, where the truth is, one team could have been playing, several rain games over the course of a season, that kind of thing. So, yeah, it's a complicated thing to explain, but in terms of if you're just talking about total points, I can tell you that one is absolutely key.
Yes, and Fareed saying, because I know he's also worked on some models in his time. Building a model is the hard part, and I think you'd probably agree with this, Nathan, whereas keeping it up to date is actually a little bit easier. I guess you do give it a little bit of a tweak every now and again as well. So what do you make of that statement?
Yeah, I think it's it depends how you're thinking about when you say building a model. I think probably the hardest part, or the most time-consuming part, is building a framework that then you can test things. So you can have theories about all different kind of things, but if you don't have a framework where you can say, okay, I'm going to add this statistic or try this thing or this combination of things, and then be able to back test that and get the results, you need that framework so that you can easily sub things in and out. And then I guess part of that framework as well is automating as many things as you can. So if you've got something where it's going to take you 2 hours on a Sunday night to manually type a bunch of stuff in, or go and get things off websites and keep it updated, chances are you're going to miss weeks because you're too busy or whatever, or you're going to lose interest, or it's just going to get too hard. So I think it's important to have a framework that allows you to test, and a framework that allows you to keep things up to date.
Chris makes an interesting comment. He said the way that Mossman bets in getting your money down early in the week, he couldn't do that financially or mentally. Now, I want to comment on this. Mossman, because I used to be an early in the week punter, and I must be honest, I was a more successful punter when I was early in the week because I was able to get that value lines. So he makes 2 comments now, financially and mentally. And I must admit, as the sort of things got tighter and I had a family and that, I somehow just didn't have as much money floating in the bookies account. So I didn't want to necessarily tie up in case I wanted to use it somewhere else. So the one point, I agree with Chris on that. And then mentally, he was saying that as well. And I also found, as much as I totally like the concept of getting on early, I somehow battled with it after a while. I started battling with it mentally. What do you make of that statement?
On the mental side, I actually feel the opposite. Like once you've fired into something and you feel comfortable with it, from my perspective, I don't have to think about it anymore. So that's good. Like, I don't, in some ways, like I don't want to spend all week looking at lines, monitoring things, looking at news, that kind of thing. It's like once I've got all the information that I need, I can just fire into something and not think about it again, until sometimes not till Monday morning, and I'll just check balances or check scores, whatever it is. So mentally, that's actually easier than kind of, sweating things for, a bunch of days during the week. So that's kind of part of it on the mental side. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And as I say, I got out of that. I remember there was a company called MBet in South Africa. They used to be first out on a Monday with Super Rugby. This is sort of, I'm going back years before, a lot of bookies started coming out early and the lines started coming out of the season. I worked out at the end of the season that the reason I made money was because of my Monday betting. Because if I waited until kickoff every time, where's maybe points you want to probably wait and see the weather and that. So I think it makes very good sense. And one day we'll have to get a couple of you guys who do models and that in and just have a general chat. It's always interesting to see how other guys bet and stuff as well. I'll just quickly check the comments if there's anything more. Fareed says, for example, my model gives a range of. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, just also in terms of like early week betting, is that for me it's not necessarily like really early. Like I will be able to bet as soon as lines come out on a Monday. A lot of it is just kind of looking for things that are clearly wrong. And we'll come to a game I think next, which is falls into that category. But the rest of it, with Super Rugby, with the teams coming out on a Wednesday like they do now, I've got all the information I need by 4:00 Wednesday afternoon, New Zealand time. So I can fire into that and then not have to think about that again for the rest of the week. So that's, some people might think that's early, but at that point you've got all the information. There's nothing else there. So there's not. And if you look at last week by comparison, the only early week bet I had in URC was the Lions, and that was because that number was, when it came out, was just wrong. The rest of it, I waited and I bet after that team news came out, which is pretty late in the week here, because obviously URC, they only have the 24 hours in advance, whereas Super Rugby is a lot earlier.
Yeah, I really wish they'd bring the teams out for URC earlier, because I do find that is very frustrating. Fareed just says, because I know Fareed has shared his model with me a couple of times. He says he's got, for example, on his model, a range of 25 to 35 for the Chiefs away when handicapped there. And spotting mispricing.
I've got 29, so I'm right in the middle of there.
No, you're right in the middle. So, very interesting. Dinesh is just saying a team sheet's very important. I have to agree. And Crotip says, Brent, do you remember the days where you could get Griquas plus 30 at home on a Tuesday? Yes, those are the good old days, Crotips. And Curry Cup, I can tell you, certainly one of the competitions where, in the good old days, I used to certainly make a lot of money. Making money is tougher now. You've got to have. I believe you've got to have the sort of attitude that Nathan's got to it now if you want to make money consistently in rugby betting. Right, let's move on to the next game. Brumbies -7.5 against the Crusaders, and we've got a points line here of 52.5. Gee whiz, who would have ever thought at the start of the season we'd be seeing Crusaders going into games as underdogs?
Yeah, 100%. So this is great timing that this is the game that we're talking about next, given the conversation that we've just had, because we're talking about early week betting and looking for egregiously wrong lines. So you don't need a model. We didn't need a model for this one when the opening line came out at 3.5. Home field advantage in Super Rugby and a lot of the major competitions is somewhere around sort of 4.5 points, depending on how you want to judge it. So for that line to come out 3.5, you are saying effectively that these are either even teams or that the Crusaders are the slightly better team. Now, I don't think anything or anybody that has watched any amount of rugby up to this point this season would say that that is correct. So, it was so obviously wrong. It was never going to. The number was around long enough for people to get involved. So, and I certainly did. But yeah, as the Admiral said, -3 was nonsense. It's illogical. As I said, nobody on the planet could look at the season that these two teams have had and said that they were even, which is what that number implies.
Yeah, and I agree with you. There was time for guys to get on there. I think it's just there's still a bit of. It's one of those things. It's like when you talk Crusaders, they can lose 10 in a row, but people will still have this impression that things are going to turn, things are going to turn, things are going to turn. And maybe bookies have that same sort of view early in the week, but certainly good movement there. Mark is making the point he can't believe the Crusaders form. I mean, yeah, me too. Look, I must say, as I said, I had a good Super Rugby. I was on the Highlanders early last week. I took a win multiple Blues, Highlanders and Force at 12-1, and that actually ensured I made a nice profit on the weekend. So I was on the Highlanders there, and I didn't really base it much on the Highlanders. It's just the fact that the Crusaders have really been so poor. So yeah, they really have been poor, Mark. So quite strange. Any thoughts on the points line there? I know Brumbies.
I think it's bang on.
Can be quite low scoring.
Yeah, I think this one's bang on.
Quite
I think
on.
this is right where it should be.
On, yeah.
I've got a number that's right around there. So, and then just in terms of the handicaps, like I am projecting Brumbies by 9. So there might be a small amount of value there, but hopefully you were in the wider weight club and got on board a bit earlier.
Right. Well, Roy Brown, I haven't seen you comment either before. He says Rebels plus 18.5, free money.
Yeah.
I tell you what,
well, he's on
free money.
I was just going to say he's on an island by himself, just based on the earlier comments from people.
yeah, that's also true. Right, let's get into the next game, and here we got a big handicap, and this is a very interesting game to me. We've got Blues minus 19.5 against the Highlanders. Certainly from where I think I saw the early lines, and I'll double check. I think it's been fairly stable all week. In fact, yeah, I capped this game a lot lower, so I was out on my handicap. I went 12.5, but it opened here in South Africa at 18.5. What do you make of this one, Nathan?
Yeah, it actually opened sort of, I think 15.5 or thereabouts earlier in the week. So I did have a bit of a. Well, actually, no, I tell a lie. So I'm not really involved in this one. I've actually taken a bit of a middle because, as I said, there was a 15.5, and I've seen 21.5 somewhere else. And again, I've got my model's saying 27, and mentally I just couldn't get there. I think part of, again, the modeling process is recognizing when the numbers maybe aren't quite right. Sometimes you should believe them when you don't, but there are other times where I think it's just it can be just a starting point, like kind of a guideline. So yeah, like I'm kind of a little bit on the fence here, and literally on the fence in terms of the bets that I've actually taken. And there are a few missing for the Blues as well, and it's I guess after what I saw from the Highlanders last week, it's it's a bit of a stretch to say that the Blues are easily going to win by sort of 20 points. That's it's a big margin in any New Zealand derby, but especially with a few missing for the Blues.
Yeah, I must have a couple of comments along those lines in the chat. And Blake coming in, Blues have shuffled the deck here. Landers unchanged to cover the handicap. Blake,
yeah,
I'm with you on this one, and I'm basing it on my, I'm basing it a bit on my original sort of thing that, the Highlanders may not be perhaps even quite as bad as people think they are. As much as, people tend to overrate the Crusaders, the Highlanders put in a few indifferent performances, but, I was pretty impressed. I was at the Drua that they beat on the road a couple of weeks ago, which was, everyone, a lot of people are. Was it Moana?
Yeah.
But in fact, I think Moana were favourites for the game, if I'm not mistaken. So
they were.
I don't know.
Don't
ask
me.
The Highlanders are that bad. Okay.
I was going to say, don't ask me how the Moana became favourites in that game. I mean, that's one of these ones where I think sometimes when lines start to steam, people just want to jump on board, because that was the one. Kind of digressing here, but I think opened sort of 6.5 or something. So I can understand how I can understand why people would be betting Moana between 5 and 4 or something like those lines. But when it gets to pick him, and
Yes.
people are still because that there's still money coming to get it to whatever it closed at, -2.5. I just sometimes I don't understand where the money's coming from.
Yeah, it's sometimes like the old snowball rolling down the hill. It just picks up momentum and everyone starts jumping on and not really maybe even thinking about it any further, just wanting to be on where the money is coming. Billy Harmon is out, says Fareed for the Highlanders. But yeah, look, this game, I mean, I'm not going to call this a best bet, but I do like the Highlanders to beat the Cappy. I saw comments, I think, from Admiral Highlanders under 18.5. I must say, the Blues defense has been superb this season, and that's, it is something to consider. And I think, I looked at it, can't remember who they were playing a couple of weeks ago, and I thought opposing or going unders on Blues opponents every game is probably not the worst strategy. They certainly are very strong in defense, but yeah, looks a bit of a dangerous one. Fortunately, I won't get too involved in that one. I'm coaching a bit of rugby at the moment, and my side will be playing that morning, so I'll be probably preparing the boys for the game at that stage. Let's move into the next game. The Force, -1.5 against the Waratahs, and we've got a points line here of 55.5. It was the Force last week who did the business for me there. I managed to get them nice and early at 13-10, and they delivered the win quite comfortably. They play the Waratahs now, and they're narrow favourites, Nathan.
They are. Sorry, the Force narrow favourites.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, narrow favourites. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so that's flipped again. So we've seen a whole variety of numbers that are around about Pick'em on this game, and yeah, I lean to the Force even at that number. There are, but I again, I was talking about earlier about games that I haven't bet at this point, and then I ask myself why. I think this would be one of these ones. I can understand the case for the Force. They're a settled team. Waratahs, really decimated in the front row, but I think in some ways that is kind of reflected in the line. So whether there's still value in there, I don't know. What I did do is I actually found two money lines. One which had the Force as favourite, and one that had the Waratahs as favourite, and I just bet both sides. So I think sometimes when you don't have a strong opinion, if you can just sort of scalp something, it's better than nothing.
No, that's it exactly. And was the draw quota there as well? Do you have to keep an eye on the game and perhaps cover a little bit on the draw so you don't lose both bets?
This is draw no bet. So that is something that obviously people should keep an eye on. Draw no bet. Yeah.
Okay, no, then you can relax and you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
Admiral, you echo my thoughts here, Admiral. If we disagreed on the Drua Reds game, we align on this one. I think the bookies do underestimate the Force, because I look at home this season, they've been pretty decent. They've had some absolute shockers on their travels, and I think I'm personally leaning towards the Force here. Chris reckons he likes the overs, and Fareed makes a comment that the Force falls apart in the second half. So yeah, I must say it looks a tricky weekend to make bucks, but I am leaning towards the Force there. That is the final Super Rugby game.
So I was just going to say that I did mention that that I had one game which I was projecting over, and so I'll back up Chris here and say this is the one that I've got as an over game. Okay,
and Tikawanga coming in and saying the same. This is overs all day. Okay, so when we get that sort of rubber stamping, definitely one to look at the overs. Johan, he likes his 1 to 12 margins. The only thing, and I don't put nothing against the 1 to 12 bet. I think it's a nice bet, but the only thing I always say about the 1 to 12 is you're never safe. You're always one score away from losing your bet. And if you got overs on points, for example, you could win it in the 63rd minute. But when you back 1 to 12, you must know that you've got to be watching that game right until the end, because a score at some point for either side can take you over the 12 points. Right, let's have a look at the next game. And it is now, we're talking URC. We finished the Super Rugby. And this is Friday night's game, Edinburgh +3.5. Points line of 48.5.
This is a game, and I sort of talked about this a little bit in past weeks, where I know where I guess the holes are in the models that I run, and I know that this game is one where I've got Edinburgh a bit underrated, and so when I see basically a number that favours Munster, I'm kind of like, in this game. I'm a little bit wary of it, so it's probably one that I will stay away from.
Yeah, I think probably looked at this game. I think let me just quickly check what I capped this game at and what it came out at. Yeah, in South Africa. Anyway, yeah, I actually made Edinburgh narrow favourites for this game, and I see it came out here. That's for now. So it's really leaning towards them, but I've got a very similar view on this one. It's not something I'm particularly strong on, and I'm going to be out on Friday night, so I'm going to miss this game. So maybe it's just as well I won't be having a punt on that one. Stephen does say Munster easy win. The Admiral likes the 1 to 12. Farid also likes Munster there. So yeah, quite a bit of support for Munster. But let's see what Friday night's other game is. Now, this is an interesting one. Zebre up against the Scarlets. I say interesting because neither of these sides are challenging for top 8. So these games can often be hard to depict, and I'm talking here from a total points point of view. They can be very loose and high scoring, or they can be absolutely scrappy. So I'm not sure which we're going to get here, but we've got the handicap of the home team plus 2.5 against the Scarlets.
Yeah, I've seen people talking about this potentially being a Zebre money line play, and I can see that actually. So yeah, again, it's not something that I've got a strong feel for. Just based on the teams that I know are overrated, and I know that I've got. It's a really interesting one. Like if it had time during the week, one of the things I was intending to do was sort of go back through the history of results for the Scarlets and try and figure out why I have them rated so highly. That's the thing about some of these modeling. Sometimes it can be a bit of a black box, and you don't know why things come out the way they do, and you kind of have to pick through. So yeah, I have the Scarlets horribly overrated, and that's why I basically all season I've stayed away from Scarlets games because I haven't had the time to go back and figure out why.
Why they're overrated. No, good point. Funny enough, I haven't looked at the weather on this one, but I actually think that this is the sort of game that could be fairly high scoring. Zebre, yeah, they've been a bit disappointing since that early win. I think it was over the Sharks. And I just think this could be a game where both teams just throw it around and we might get some points flowing. But at this stage, nothing very firm on that one for me as well. Right, let's move on to the next game. This is now Saturday's action. It's the early kickoff here in South Africa. We got the Bulls. There's been money for them this week, no doubt about that. They're now minus 20.5 against the Benetton side, who got a valuable win last week away to the Sharks. We've got a points line here in Pretoria of 59.5. Sounds high. I'm not sure it's high enough.
Yeah, I took an early number on the Bulls. Sort of around 18. That was one of the few kind of early ones that I took. So it has obviously moved up a little bit from there. I think where it is probably about right. I'm just looking, at the table it's one of these ones where I think because the URC table is so congested that there is kind of something to play for just about everybody except for the real bottom feeders. So we have talked in the past about teams when they go on tour and whether they would have a target number of points. Clearly, I think Benetton, at least based on the bookies lines, would have overperformed last week by winning outright. So they would be, would they be targeting a win here? Look, I'm sure that everyone always plays to win, right? But I think whether they have a strong expectation of winning this game, I'm not so sure. And to be fair, they do have a 4-point buffer over Connacht between 8 and 9. So it might be that, and I haven't looked who they're playing next week, but Benetton, they might take the decision that if they can come out of this game unscathed and win next week, that might be enough for them.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's another way I sometimes look at these games, similar to what you say now. If I'm Benetton, I beat the Sharks last week. And did they get I can't recall if it was like a bonus point win or just a win last week against the Sharks.
I think it was pretty tight. So yeah, it was.
I think.
Yeah, no. So no bonus point.
Probably just. No, but if you said to Benetton at the start of their trip, you can come away from South Africa with, for argument's sake, 5 points. So 4 points last week against the Sharks, and I often look at a game like this where you've got a side like Benetton. They won something out the game. What's their best chance of getting something out the game? Can they beat the Bulls? I know they probably can, but it's a long shot. They're 20-point underdogs. Can they get a losing bonus point? Also, same thing, but they're 20-point underdogs. Can they get a 4-try bonus point? And that's where I say, if I'm Benetton here, I come in and I throw the ball around because, interestingly enough, if the Bulls end up scoring and going 50 points clear, they've still got a very good chance of getting that bonus point because the Bulls are going to step off the gas as they've done in recent weeks as well against a number of sides. So, which brings me then in my sort of roundabout way to this points line 59.5. And I'm suggesting that it's high, but I still think at Loftus, and I've seen conditions are going to be good. I don't think it's high enough. I think we're going to get a 60 plus a year. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I like it. Yeah, I think that's logical. I think that's I think Benetton are probably not realistically expecting to come away with anything in terms of a win. So I think a point could be crucial, like a point of any kind. Benetton, I just had a quick look there. So they're at home to Edinburgh next week. I'm sure that's a game that they would be targeting in terms of making the playoffs. With that 4-point buffer over Connacht. So yeah, absolutely. I think a bonus point of any kind for them would be crucial.
Blake coming in and says Bulls team points over. That should be at around 39.5. Blake, based on the current points line and the handicap. So I suspect that might move out a little bit as well. I like that bet as well. I think, I think the Bulls will go. And the Admiral says a brave man to back the unders here. Yeah, very brave indeed. So I definitely won't be one of those brave ones back in the unders. Right, let's move on to a game which I must admit it's one of, like you said, there's games that teams have got a lot to play for, and then there's probably two games where there's not much on the line, and this is one of them. Ospreys minus 15.5 against the Dragons. It's the Welsh derby. If you're watching this on a Saturday afternoon, you've got to question your social life. You must have something better.
No disrespect, of course, to Welsh rugby, but
I am teasing. I've actually been quite impressed with the Ospreys this year, to be honest. I've enjoyed watching them. Yeah.
I mean, again, depending on conditions, then what you're saying is that this might lend itself to a potential overs game as well. But I did take the Ospreys earlier at minus 13.5, and again, this is all before team sheets that I am projecting, like a decent sized win for them. So I think I'm sort of favouring the Ospreys here, but again, we'll see what happens when teams come out.
Well, WJ says he is going, but he did get the ticket for free. And if you're going to the game, it's a rule with a handicap. You've got to send us, at least on Twitter or the forum or whatever, you've got to give us a weather forecast about 15 minutes before the game. We want to know what conditions are like. Cappy's high says for Reed, he's going at Dragons on the plus. Right now, sorry, Welsh fans, I'm only teasing there. We used to have Jules who watched the show. He was a big Dragons fan, and I can't remember who it was. Always climbed into the Dragons, and he used to get so upset. Right, this game is an interesting one. The Lions up against the Waratahs, the Glasgow Warriors, and I actually capped this game plus 4.5 Lions, and it's plus a half. You could probably tell us a bit more about the movement here. I haven't really been following in the week, Nathan, and we got the points line at 55.5.
Yeah, I haven't been following the point movement, the line movement too closely on this one. Again, it's one of these tricky ones where the Lions are technically, I guess they're still in contention. They 100% need to win this one. For Glasgow, I mean, if they want to get top spots, so there's still plenty to play for on this one. At the moment, I have the Lions as a very small favourite, by one. So it's kind of probably in the wheelhouse where I wouldn't necessarily play, but I am keen to see what Glasgow do in terms of their team. I imagine in this that they would have been targeting this game. It was a strong team they put out last week, but it could have been maybe a wee bit stronger. So it kind of implies to me that they'll bring the house on this one, and if they do, then I think I think that I think they'll probably be narrow favourites, but it'd be so close that I don't know that it's something that I'd probably bet on. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, it could be one of those games where one of the teams get out by 14 to 17 points and the other team comes back. I can see this one going right to the way. Just quickly on the Warriors, I haven't had a good study of the table. I know they're top of the log. How many points ahead of Leinster are they at the moment?
One.
1 point. Okay, so really they need the win here. They need the win here because they've got to. I mean, we'll talk about the Leinster game later. It's not a given that they'll win, but they've got to go for the win here. Personally, I think the Warriors get the job done here. I was not impressed. I was not impressed with the Lions last week. I thought they were playing a poor Cardiff team. They failed to come. Talking from the pocket as well. I was on Lions over 35.5 points. I thought it was absolutely disgraceful that the Lions playing at altitude get a try under the post, and Mohamba sits there and waits for the clock to go down. When you're trying to run the opposition off your feet, I thought that was absolutely poor. And I think the Lions early in the season were playing some great rugby. I haven't been impressed with them of late. Glasgow Warriors all the way to the bank for me on this one. I think they're going to win it. Points, I'm a bit nervous. These Ellis Park games have not been, Loftus, I think, is averaging something like 69 points a game or something this season. I'm estimating there. But the Lions games haven't been as high scoring. And I'm a little bit nervous of this points line, although 55.5 might tempt me. But Warriors for me here, guys. And Blake, you and I, we're either both going to make money this weekend or we both going to lose big, because we seem to be very, very similar. Good to see Johan coming in and rather stamping the Glasgow win as well. Right, let's see what else we got on the cards. We're nearing the end of the show, and we've got 3 games left to cover. Now, this is a very interesting one, and I'm very interested in Nathan's views on this. We've got Connacht at home. As you say, they're still technically in with a shout of a top 8 finish. They host the Stormers, and we got handicap here plus 5.5 Connacht and points line of 50.5.
Yes, so I have this. The number where it currently is right around where I expected it to be and where I've projected it to be. But I did take a nibble at the Stormers earlier when it was minus 3.5 because I just thought that was short. And yeah, so I suppose technically I'm probably leaning Stormers here. And I do think, obviously, both teams have kind of got a lot to play for, but fading Connacht in recent times has been fairly good. It certainly was last week. So yeah, Stormers, they're in 5th there, so they're 6 points off the Bulls in 4th. If they have any hope of securing a home final of any kind, this is a must-win game for them, clearly. So yes, so all that said, I'm kind of leaning Stormers, but the current number is getting pretty close to kind of leave alone territory for me.
It's interesting to just go back to that table there. You say Stormers are 6 points behind the Bulls, eh?
They are 6 points behind the Bulls. Yep. So Bulls. So
if the Bulls pick up 5 points in the earlier game, the Stormers mathematically won't be able to get 4th anymore.
That would be right. Yeah.
Because the Bulls will be 11 clear with 2 games. Okay, yep. So that could be something to watch, because I just find little things like that sometimes can make a difference. So I'm going, and I haven't watched a lot of Connacht, and maybe that's a bit of a problem here, because Stormers worry me a little bit. Someone up above also said can't be trusted. I find myself leaning towards the home team here, but yeah, I think Connacht. I'm going Connacht on the board here. Not a massive bet, but I like Connacht, and I just don't trust the Stormers team this season. They did finish very strong last week, but they were playing a very weak team. And Stephen reckons, and Stephen, you getting to my point there, if the Bulls, as we expect them to do, pick up the 5 points, there's not quite as much riding on this. They kind of, I suppose, have to travel one way or another. In fact, I saw a lot of people predicting Stormers against the Bulls at Loftus, I suppose, if they finish 4th and 5th. So yeah, interesting one. I don't know.
Yeah, and there are a lot of permutations here as well, because the thing is that although Connacht are 4 points off Benetton in 9th place, their final game is away to Leinster, and this will be like a way to Leinster after the Cup. So depending on what Leinster need to do, because they might potentially need some points as well to get home playoffs, etc. That will be a tricky one.
Yeah, it certainly will. I must say, it's like I actually love this stage of the season. Just with all the permutations and trying to figure out what's going to happen. It is certainly something I enjoy trying to pick my way through, even though I'm not always correct. This, I thought, was an incredibly tough game to handicap at the start of the week. I'll quickly look on good for the game here. I went Sharks minus 3.5, so pretty close to where it was. It came out sort of 4.5 here in South Africa as well. So not a lot of movement. But for me, the big trick here, Nathan, was Sharks have got a final next week in England. They did field a strong side last week against Benetton, and my thinking was that, let's play our guys now and rest them against Cardiff. But the problem is that Cardiff are really not a great side either. So even if the Sharks rest plays, you might even find the second stringers can almost take it here. What about this one? This looks like a tricky one to me.
I totally agree that, I think the thinking for the Sharks was to play the first team last week with the intention of rotating this week. So Cardiff, this is a game, an early week bet for me. So there was 8.5 Cardiff on the plus was available earlier in the week. So obviously it's come down a whole lot since then. And I think at 2.5, I mean, is Cardiff going to beat the second string Sharks team? I mean, I guess it's possible. But it's like it's probably right around that range, right, where it's close to a coin flip, and I can see it being a bit of a coin flip. So I think, as I said, the Cardiff plus 8.5 earlier in the week, it just seemed like a standout. I just think that was a typical kind of bookies line which they will put out, which is based on a spreadsheet number with no thought to the context around the game, what's happening the following weeks, which is fairly typical. I think most of them actually do that. There'll be some sort of basic power rating in a spreadsheet. There'll be a home field advantage number, and let's just stick that opening line out and see what happens. So
yeah, 100%. A couple of other comments there. Dinesh saying rubbish v rubbish, which is also one of Oracle's favourites. Johan, I just bring in Johan's comment up here because I'm quite interested in this. I also thought overs points here. I thought Sharks fielding some weakened team. I mean, Cardiff, nothing to lose in the game. 47.5 seems low, but I have checked the forecast in Durban, and there is some rain forecast. So I guess, Johan, what I would suggest on this game is probably holding fire. But if the conditions look reasonable, and we all know sometimes rain is not as bad as just a whole high humidity in Durban. The humidity was in the 70s. But if conditions look reasonable, I'm with Johan on this one. I think I might be going, overs on points on this one possibly. But
I think what I need to start having a to-do list, which is like little research projects, and I think that one there about looking about points lines in games where teams rotate really heavily and roll out the B team. I think that'd be an interesting one because we talked about it, right off the top of the show about the effects, and you can build that narrative for both sides, right? That you play the B team, and that is it the defense or is it the attack that kind of suffers the most from that rotation? I don't know the answer to that. As I said, you'd have to do the work on that. So I think that'd be one to look at. The other thing I actually on my to-do list would be to look at the 1 to 12 odds and see if they actually stack up. So it's probably less about whether it's a good bet or not, but just whether you actually get decent odds with the 1 to 12. It's something I've never really taken the time to have a close look at. There was a comment there from Farid, which I was interested to have another look at. If you're able to,
let me bring that back up. Oops, sorry. There we go.
90% of second teams lose, right? Okay.
Does that lose the handicap for Reed or lose the match? Because I guess the handicap is also important.
Yeah, and also, I guess in circumstances where both teams lose, you'd also want to control it, I guess, for situations where the team was highly likely to lose anyway. So, yes. I'd just be interested to know, I guess, the parameters around the exercise.
Yeah. I've got another theory. So when you look at, and I agree with you, it's also not based on any substantial database or anything, but I also find sometimes the second teams, when they go into the game, so I think back to the Stormers earlier in the season, I think it was against Leicester away in the Champions Cup, and one or two other examples where the second team actually goes out there and starts off a lot better than everybody expects and sort of plays above themselves for a period of time. But I often find, and I think of the Bulls against the Northampton Saints as well, the Bulls were within 6 at the break. Yep. But I often find that the sort of fancy team in the second half starts sort of stamping their control of the game and moves away. So I suppose there's a few angles. I guess as punters, we're always looking for an edge. If we can find one somewhere, then we'll do so.
100%. That's what it's all about.
Farid is saying enough games this weekend to stay away from this one. And staying away is often very sound advice. I don't necessarily take it that often.
That's right.
The Admiral, I'll bring this up. We've discussed this before, Nathan, but the Admiral, I've noticed on Twitter, he does take he does take the 1 to 12s using a bet builder. But he says there's a bit of a glitch that inflates the odds slightly above the fair price. So, I mean, my gut instinct is that 1 to 12 odds are generally not that great. Having said that, the bookies do vary quite a bit. So you can get one bookie will give you 15 to 10 on the favorite by 1 to 12, and you might get 19 to 10, 2 to 1 for the other. I guess if you've got that bet builder option, it's probably the way to go.
I think, 100%. We've actually mentioned that a couple of times, and it's clearly it is a glitch. And I think having chatted to the Admiral about it on Twitter, I think we both had an expectation that they'd probably close that loop before too long, and they haven't. So that's interesting. And I think that talking about that overround, I mean, in general, on any multi-runner market, that's where the bookies can hide that vig. So if you're looking at an outright market and you went through and did the maths on 20 different runners in that outright market, the hold on that would be huge. But people don't know, they don't know what they're looking at. So when you're looking at a handicap line, like a two-way market, it's very easy to see if you're getting stiffed.
Right, let's move into the final game then. This is an interesting one. Ulster up against Leinster. My assumption when I handicapped this game early in the week was that Leinster would feel the weakened side with a big final to come. But at the same time, they'll want to win this game to keep themselves in with a chance of finishing top of the log. So it's a very tricky situation. I don't know if anybody has any team news there. Mark, if you're still listening, but we got Ulster slight underdogs against Leinster and a points line of 52.5.
This is a tricky one, and there's been a little bit. One of the things that it seems that the Irish teams in general are pretty good at is releasing sort of early week injury updates, and I think you're seeing it on screen right here. This was all part of this update, the number of players that they're missing, and then with Leinster, I guess we don't know. Did talk last week about the difference between the A, B, and C teams for Leinster, but I think. I think there will be a case to be made for Leinster to win this outright if they actually field a decent kind of team, given what Ulster are lacking. I just having a quick look. So I mean, Ulster are currently 6th on the table, 49 points. They're not. I mean, they're not safe yet, like in terms of making it. But again, this one heavily. I just have seen the comment there that Leo Cullen was going full strength for remaining URC games a few weeks ago. So, I mean, I'm assuming that when he said that was after that they knew they were in the final. So if we assume that, then that's an encouraging sign. And if it's true, then this is Leinster all day, right? So, I think this will be one of these ones where there'll be people vigorously smashing keyboards, 30 seconds after the teams come out, if that proves to be the case. Yeah,
interesting. Ulster struggling a bit, says Fareed. Leinster's second team should quote, even if they do field the second team. Obviously, if they don't, this cap is certainly going to, as you say, go out quite a lot. And Harry reckons he can't believe it's not an 8 to 10 point cap. Nathan, I'll tell you also what I think is quite interesting with Leinster is I think there's a B team and then there's like a BC team, if I want to call it that way. So I think the team they send out to South Africa is kind of like almost their C team. It's like it really is a weakened side. But Leinster are well capable of fielding. They're well capable of resting 4 or 5 top players and still fielding a very strong side. And I think that poor tour to South Africa might have given everyone a perception that Leinster's depth isn't that great. But I think the impression I had was that they never even really sent their B team. It was really, really fringe players that came along.
Yeah. It's I think of somebody like James Lowe, who seems to be like the Rolls Royce that they keep in the garage, and they only roll him out on a Sunday for drive around the block, because I don't know, he just doesn't feel like he's played many games this season for them at all. But they've got so much depth that you kind of forget that he even plays for Leinster sometimes.
Yeah, that's a good point as well. The Admiral saying, my guess is it will be a B+ team. Yeah, exactly. Admiral, probably not a BC team or B-, but a B+. Right, that brings us, let me just double check, but that brings us to the end of the show. So yeah, we had some great chats. Just about we didn't have another guest on, Nathan. We almost pulled the hour mark here. Just two of us chatting.
It's funny because I thought this would be a quick one because I didn't have a lot to say about too many of these games, especially at this point in the week in URC. But yeah, there's always enough topics kind of on the fringes to talk about. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think because of all those permutations, it is quite fascinating to try and second guess the team news a little bit there. So I agree with you there. Funny, I said to my wife, I'm just closing the door. I'm just going to do the show now. It won't be a long one. I've just got one guest up tonight. So excellent. And then let's just see what Blake's comment is here. Tim Ryan, last try scorer for the Reds. Barthy Saints and Quincy Bristol should be high scoring. Yeah, unfortunately, we don't even have time to talk about the Gallagher Premiership. Then we really would be running into a long show. Right, guys, it's time just to ask Nathan just to firm up on his best bets for the weekend. Yeah, what do you reckon, Nathan?
Do you know what? I'm really struggling this week with best bet. Yeah, in past weeks it's been relatively easy. So about something a little bit left field. So one thing that I've done this week, and I talked about the points lines in Super Rugby. So I've gone unders on every game except for the Reds Drua game, and then I've gone over on the Force, and I've done it as a round robin with doubles. So
okay,
so it's one of these ones where with handicaps, like I've kind of in my head I can sort of figure out where things should be, and I know what's good and what's bad. With points, it's like it's not sort of so kind of built into me that. So I've got a model that I know will sort of be about 60% right, but I struggle to tell when it's right and when it's wrong. So for me, it was easier just to say, right, I'm just going to stick them into this kind of round robin multi or parlay, and then I don't have to think about which ones are going to be right or wrong. I'm just going to hope that it lands kind of like 60 plus, and you're going to make money. So yeah, so that's what I've done. I don't know if you'd call that a best bet, but
yeah, but it's a nice. If you don't have a best bet, then it's nice to throw in something like that. I agree with you.
Yeah. So yeah, I sort of struggled a little bit just because I think some of the early week numbers have gone, and I kind of want to see a little bit more from these URC teams. So I'm kind of gonna let that one go through to the keeper, I think, this week. Sorry about that.
Just pad up to it, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. Thanks, Nathan. Thanks to all the guys in the live chat. We had a great turnout, and always good to get your contributions on the show. And Nathan, to yourself, man, have a cracking weekend. What you got planned? You're going to be watching any sport or spending a bit of time with the family?
Yeah, I actually will be at the Blues Highlanders game. So I'll give you the weather report.
Oh, thanks. Excellent. That's great news. Right. Have a great weekend. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week, Thursday. That'll be probably, I'm going to predict a shorter show because we should have a lot less games to talk about last week. We're talking Challenge Cup and Champions Cup finals. We'll, of course, have Super Rugby. But I'm not going to make that prediction because it'll probably be wrong. But thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week for the rugby chat, for the handicap rugby chat that matters.